Lesson 3. Let's see if whether or not we're going to talk about weather today. Hey everybody, my name is Matthew. Welcome to part 3 of the World Building Workshop. Grab a scrap sheet of paper and a writing utensil. Let's get right into the first tool. This is merely awareness of a horrible, debilitating affliction. World Builder's disease. World Builder's disease is when you spend so much time world building that you never actually get to your story. You never actually get to your campaign. The late stages of World Builder's disease can manifest in two very problematic ways. The first is that you lose enjoyment in building your world. You spend so much time and so much energy and making so many different details that all of a sudden it snowballs into this chore and it just stops being fun, and so you stop doing it. The second is you don't feel like you're ready to start your story or start your campaign because you haven't built the world enough yet. Don't get me wrong, we all enjoy the aspect of building our own worlds. That's why you're watching these videos. I'm gonna hit you with some cold hard truths right now. People aren't really gonna care about your world building nearly as much as they are about the characters in the world. Those are who we relate to. Characters will be a part of the world, but where they are in relationship to that world is going to be an afterthought. Starting a campaign for something like D&D, you don't need that much to get the ball rolling. That's kind of why I'm putting this workshop together. After all these videos, in less than 2 hours, you are going to have enough of a world built that you can start playing a campaign right now. Of all the D&D sessions that I have personally been a player in, more than half of them have fizzled out before level 3. Imagine spending an entire month, God forbid an entire year, putting together a world or a setting only to play 5 games in that and maybe having everybody at the table go, you know, I kind of don't think I like playing D&D. Let's go back to playing Gloomhaven instead. This isn't doom and gloom. This is awareness of this problem. Never lose focus of why you are world building. You are world building for a story, for a campaign. Most of us are not world building just to world build. Keep that in mind. That under our belt, now on to today's lesson. On your sheet of paper, I want you to write something down. How's the weather today? Think about the weather patterns and the climate. What does a nice day in your setting look like? How often does that happen? Is everybody excited when it's nice and sunny and warm outside? Or is everybody sick of how dry it is and they're waiting for some rain? How does the weather change in your setting? Are there seasons? The only reasons we have seasons on Earth is because of the tilt of Earth's axis. The only reason we have tides is because the moon is there. The sun makes the wind and the water cycle. So if your setting lacks those elements, understand that those things won't exist. You could play around with seasons. Maybe your setting doesn't even have them. Or you could take the Game of Thrones approach. Summer lasts years and years, and then when it gets to winter, that lasts years and years. Something, winter is coming. Even if you're on a spaceship, your crew is probably gonna run into some electrified nebula. But movies always have the space weather that disrupts the shields and now they can't teleport or something. Because weather can be something interesting to a story, and a climate controlled area all the time is gonna get stale. Next, think about natural disasters. Write down 3 ways inclement weather or natural disasters could be a main point in your story, as they are something that is a obstacle or something that the people in your story have to deal with. Natural disasters could be related to the weather, like a horrible hurricane, but they could also be geological. An earthquake that makes tsunamis and destroys civilizations and buildings isn't necessarily weather. If you have magic in your setting, you get to make magic weather. And that can be some really entertaining, really fun, interesting things that you can do with that. Storms that render magic inert. Storms that make magic even more powerful. It's perfectly fine if you write down knife rain and then remember Adventure Time already did it. That's fine. Maybe your players would actually enjoy that. Maybe not their characters, though, who have to deal with raining swords. Bring it back to consistency if you want to. Everything in the video game Fallout is radioactive. So when a thunderstorm rolls in, it's a radioactive thunderstorm. Again, magic in your setting, write down some magical phenomenon. Okay, why talk about all this weather-related things? Why worry about climate at all? Because this is the backdrop of your setting. Everything moving forward will be impacted by the climate and the weather. A great spot for people to have a town and a nice valley with a river, maybe on the coast for some trade. No one's gonna live there if there's acid fog there all the time. Also, all these things are really going to ground what everybody is seeing and feeling. The most pronounced way that you can set the scene is to first talk about the weather. Write this down. Every time there is a scene change or a new day starts, tell everybody what the weather is. I got these dice a while back, and they're some of my favorites because anytime there's a new day, I roll them. The one furthest to the left is what the weather was overnight, and the one to the right is what the weather is going to become during the day. You don't need dice like this. You could make a table and roll a d8 or a d20 if you wanted to. It can be very impactful to tell everybody that there is a heavy rainstorm during the day, and it just makes sense why they don't see anybody milling about town. And the people that are walking through the streets are miserable and soaked. It's just another way to make everything feel just a little bit more real. Today's big question is, when was a time where a large change happened to your world? And what were the results of that? We're still talking big picture here, so maybe a time where temperature changed wildly, a time when the planet plunged into an ice age. Or was there something that was gained or lost? Plenty of stories have a time where a meteorite added to the world changed things. Or think about the city of Atlantis, an entire city lost in the ocean, and how that changed history. So take a little while. What was the big change that occurred in your world? Maybe write little notes about each of those. A time when the temperature changed quite a lot, a time that the geology changed quite a lot, a time that something was lost, or a time that something was gained. Good places to start. Mull them over for a little while and figure out which one jumps out at you as something interesting to add to your story and make a part of your world. My little example of all this. What do I got? Well, obviously a fairly large change happened when the planet was captured by this sun and is now in orbit instead of drifting through space. The planet was immensely cold, but now that it has input from this star, it has warmed up significantly. So now we actually have flowing water for the first time on this rock in maybe thousands and millions of years. I think a nice temperate day might be kind of rare on this planet, because again, we have the two extremes and that belt where everything lives and can thrive is going to be subject to a lot of cold winds from the dark side and a lot of hot winds and maybe some fairly severe storms from the sun-blasted side of the planet. I can already see that the mix of these extreme temperatures and air currents making a lot of hostile weather. Lots of hurricanes. Maybe lots of tornadoes. Let's grab onto that idea and make it extra special. What if there are large plots of iron ore that are exposed to the surface and now they are either rusted or exposed and sandblasted by these winds? So these tornadoes come along and pick up a whole lot of these iron shavings, this sandblast of metal, and swirls around until a thunderstorm strikes it, igniting it into a fire tornado. That's a pretty extreme weather phenomenon, and I think people would tell stories about the time that they saw an actual fire tornado off on the horizon, or maybe one was remarkably close to them. And look at that. That kind of feels like magical phenomenon, but it's not magic. If there's a lot of bad weather on this planet, then the people are probably going to have to escape it somehow. I hope a lot of these prompts got you thinking about some cool ideas for your world. Next lesson, we're going to talk about probably everybody's favorite part of world building, flora and fauna. But until next time, UGM, avoid that world builder's disease and get started with your very first game with tips in this video right here.